Welcome to the Be Well podcast. Here we share real stories, have honest conversations, and offer practical advice for moms that are dealing with pregnancy, postpartum, and beyond. I'm your host, Candace Jackson. I am a birth and postpartum doula, childbirth educator, wife, and mama to two. Today we have Sarah with us. Sarah is a full spectrum doula, a lactation educator, and also an integrative nutrition diabetes coach. And she lives in Massachusetts. Thank you so much, Sarah, for being here. Can you tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself and the work that you do? Because you do a lot.
Sure. And yes, and thank you, Candace. I just want to start off by saying what a pleasure it is to connect with you here. This is our first time getting to chat with each other, and I'm so excited to share more about what I do. As you mentioned, I'm a full spectrum doula. I'm also a newly trained lactation educator. I just trained with BADT, which was a wonderful program that I did over the summer. And I've been an integrative nutrition diabetes coach for over or just about 10 years now. I did my training with IIN back in 2016. So it's been a long journey of wellness. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was a freshman in high school.
Okay.
And the struggles that I've had through that experience and so many others, as we all carry a lot through the years, definitely pointed me in a path of wanting to explore wellness, not just for myself, but for others. And I truly feel grateful. I feel like I'm finally arriving in that place that, I had this vision of where I wanted to go and I wasn't sure how to get there. And now that I've been able to do all these trainings, and then also I became a mom in 2022. I had my first baby, and then my second baby, I can't believe it, he is about to turn 1 year old. So now I have two kids and this doula business and lactation education offerings. And I feel truly grateful to be connected with so many wonderful people, not just in the diabetes community, but then also now in this reproductive wellness, reproductive justice, and also birth and postpartum space. So thank you so much for having me.
Yes, you do so much. You are a superwoman for sure. So you mentioned that you had a baby in 2022. So let's go through all of your births. So tell me a little bit about how was that pregnancy and then how did that labor and also ultimately the birth. You can even go into postpartum. How was postpartum for you as well? I just want to hear the story about everything you can tell me about both of those births.
Sure. Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, I've had a lot of experience trying to figure out how wellness fits into my life. And I struggled with my diabetes management after getting diagnosed as a teenager. And I did not do well testing my blood sugar, taking insulin. I felt like it was something that I couldn't do. I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the right foundation, and I also didn't have the friendships that I do now. And I truly think it's the peer support that was what helped me figure out how to have a better relationship with diabetes and then also myself. I had more confidence once I found friends who were kind of going through the same struggles and they were sharing their tips and tricks with me. And so for many years, it was about preparing my body for this ultimate goal. And for me, that was becoming a mother and moving through a pregnancy while living with pre-existing diabetes, because they're all different types of diabetes. And for me, as a birth worker and as someone in the wellness space, I like to support people with all types of diabetes. I don't like to think of it as just type 1 or type 2 gestational. It's like no matter what type of diabetes you have, you deserve support, you deserve education, you deserve resources and access to the things that are going to help you live your best life. So for me, that was kind of what I was doing for so many years, was like, how many tools can I put into my toolbox here so that I can help myself? And then in turn, hopefully someday these will be things that I carry into the work I do to help others. So I became a yoga teacher. I was guiding meditations for some time. I helped to start a nonprofit called the Diabetes Sangha, which is a wonderful nonprofit based here in the United States. There are Zoom meditations almost every day of the week, which is really wonderful. And then as I was thinking about becoming a mom, it was around the time when COVID happened and I got sent home to work from home for a little while. And fortunately for me, I feel like I really did well during that time as far as life slowed down so much for me that I was able to have such a greater dedication and focus on my diabetes management and on all the other things that were really supportive for me. And that looked like yoga or, just regular movement. I love taking walks. I've always been someone who has had a dog. So at the time I had a service dog for diabetes. His name was Hawkeye. And so we'd be getting up every morning and heading out. And that did wonderful things, not just for my blood sugar, but also for my mental health. And I really felt like for the first time in my life, I was in a space, both physically, but then also mentally, to take on the challenge that is managing a pregnancy with diabetes. And so I was turning 30 in 2020. So right around my 30th birthday, my at the time my boyfriend, now husband, he proposed and we decided, we were like, you know what? Like, we're not the type of people that want this big, lavish wedding. We actually are just so excited to get started with life and to have a family. And there's a pandemic. So why not just skip all the fancy party stuff and just get married? So we got married a few months later. And then I feel like I'm one of those people. It's like, that says people will say it takes so long to get pregnant. And for some people it does, but for some people it doesn't. For some people it happens pretty quickly. And so that was our story. So we were very fortunate. I had been doing a lot of fertility awareness with myself. I had come off using an IUD, which I had had for upwards of like 7, almost 8 years at the time. And so I felt really confident about my cycles. And one of the reasons why I was tracking my cycles at that time was because there is such a strong connection to our menstrual cycles and the ways that we can manage and approach diabetes care. And so that for me, I'm a full spectrum doula. So I try to support people through the full spectrum of reproductive health, everything from menstrual cycles to menopause and the stuff that happens in between. And right now, it just happens that I'm a little bit more laser focused on preconception, pregnancy, and postpartum because that's really the day to day that I'm living. But I'm also here to support people through fertility awareness, definitely supporting people through loss, and then also everything that happens after these kind of reproductive years, right? So when you're heading into perimenopause and menopause. But I was very aware of how my cycles were. And thankfully, I was pretty regular and we were able to time it just right. And I became pregnant. And I also, because of the years that I struggled with my diabetes management, I'm someone who's living with complications of diabetes. So in the past, I've dealt with signs of retinopathy, which thankfully I was able to reverse through a little bit more tighter diabetes management. But I also live with something called gastroparesis, which I think more people are becoming familiar with that term, especially with these GLP-1s that are out there. And that's kind of one of the side effects is that slower motility and digestion. But this is something that happened to me because of damage done to my vagus nerve. And so that diagnosis happened well over like 10 years before I got pregnant. So it was something that I was figuring out how to manage well. And I really thought that I had a strong handle on it. I was like, I've got this. Yoga helps so much, meditation and breathing exercise helps so much. I have certain ways that I like to eat and I do a lot of home cooking. And I just had so much confidence and pregnancy humbles you really fast. Like that's all I can say is that you can feel like you are the most prepared, that you're so strong and so ready. And sometimes you're going to end up in a situation where you just don't feel your very best or you feel very unwell. And unfortunately for me, that was my experience in my first pregnancy. And I quickly realized that my issues with nausea and gastroparesis and all those things that I thought that I would be able to overcome easily were not going to be so easy to overcome. So I definitely had hyperemesis throughout that entire pregnancy. And I also feel like I did not receive the care that I could have received and should have. And what's kind of crazy to me is that here I am pregnant for the first time. I had already done my doula training. So I'm one of those rare people that became a doula before they had kids. I think usually it's like you go through the experience and you're like, oh, wow, like this could have been so much better, or I want to support people through this experience. For me, I became a doula a year before I had my first baby. So even as a doula, and it just shows you how many issues there are systemically within the healthcare system and the ways that we are able to be cared for, and the resources that we might have access to. And all I wanted was some fluids. And it was like I was asking, for $1 million. It was like no one wanted to give me the simplest thing. And I felt like I wasn't being listened to or heard. And so that was a very unfortunate part of that initial pregnancy that I had. And thankfully, like I figured it out for myself. I got through it, and I got all the way to that moment of like, okay, is it time for induction? Like, how's this going to go? And I really wanted to go into labor on my own. With diabetes, there is that recommendation that people are induced around that 39th week. And for me, I was hoping to at least get there, but I got to 38 weeks and I was begging for that induction. And I was like, I just can't do one more day of being so sick and not able to eat anything and ready to meet this baby. And so I was induced, and it was a very long process. And the night that my oldest son was born was a very big snowstorm here in the Boston area. So we haven't had that much snow over the last couple of years, but it just happened to be the night I was having a baby. It was like this big snowstorm, and I'm getting the epidural, and the anesthesiologist is like on the phone, and he's like, "Do you mind if I take this call? I just have to figure out where I'm sleeping tonight." And I'm like, "Well,
Oh my
I'm
goodness.
very accommodating too." So I'm like, "Do what you have to do." And I'm like, "I'm just over here like needing some pain relief and like trying to have a baby." But
Yes.
um so I do have some feelings about how that all went down. I made it to 10 centimeters, and everyone's like, "All right, Sarah, it's time to push." And then all the alarms and sounds start going off. My baby started having heart rate decelerations. And this very confident OBGYN was like, "I recommend a C-section." And in that moment, even though I wanted to, put that doula hat on and say, like, I want to ask more questions and I want to slow this down, I felt like there was so much confidence there. And at that point, I was like, I'm just ready to have this baby. And if you're telling me this is an emergency, I'm going to go with the guy who sounds pretty confident about what he's saying. So down the hallway, I was whisked to the OR. We had our baby. I won't say everything went well, but in the broad scheme of things, it really did. And the postpartum experience after that was actually a lot better than I anticipated. I felt like for me, my recovery was not as challenging as I would have maybe anticipated, having had major surgery. I had never had surgery before. Luckily for me, I felt like lactation went okay. I think I could have had maybe a little bit more support there. And I do feel like I had to navigate some feelings that maybe these providers, specifically even maybe my son's pediatrician, was looking at me kind of under this microscope of like, this is a woman with diabetes. Is she going to be able to do what she needs to do to feed this child? And
Right.
I've definitely sorted through those feelings, and it's one of the reasons why I felt so strongly about, following up my doula training with a little bit more lactation educator training. And I'd love to become a lactation consultant someday, and just continue to bring more knowledge into that part of what I do, because I do feel like people with diabetes don't always get what they need as far as lactation support goes, because there are very unique considerations. So, luckily, I'm definitely someone who's like a do it yourself. And I don't mind these like trials and tribulations, because I know that they make me stronger and they make me a better advocate for the people in my life that I might be working with or connected to, whether they're friends or clients or peers or whoever it might be. I do feel like I don't mind being the one to kind of have to deal with it all, because on the other end of it, I get to transform that pain into a purpose. And that's what I've done with my diabetes diagnosis. And that's what I've done with all these things that I've gone through as a new parent, navigating both postpartum, but also life with diabetes. And I'm so grateful that my son was healthy and that we got to just kind of set forth on our life together. But in my mind, I was already thinking like, how am I going to do this next time? Which I know some people have a baby and they're like, that's it. I think I'm done with that. And for me, even with the C-section that I had in 2022, and then also I had a vaginal birth just last year, both times I'm like, that was awesome. let's do it again. So I did have a vaginal birth in 2024 in November, and I waited specifically a good amount of time. So I waited about 2 years to conceive my second so that I would have, I felt a little bit more confidence with kind of maneuvering a pregnancy again. Because with diabetes, also you can be slower with healing, and I just
Right.
wanted to make sure I gave my body enough time to replenish all the nutrients. And um, I'm very lucky and very fortunate to have access to diabetes technology. So I do wear an insulin pump and also a continuous glucose monitor, and those two kind of get to interact and talk with each other. As I'm holding it up, I know maybe not everyone will be watching, but if you are, you can see I've got the CGM on my arm and then this insulin pump, and this allows me so much more freedom with diabetes management than I ever was able to accomplish when I was on multiple daily injections and pricking my finger. And just for me, that type of management feels really hard. Like, I will call myself, I'm like a little bit lazy when it comes to that sort of stuff. So I'm like, if it makes it any easier just to have like everything attached, I don't have, I can't lose this, right? It's on my body, and that
Right.
works for me. And, um, so luckily, I was able to maintain really excellent blood sugar management from the time my son was born until I got pregnant the second time. So heading into that second pregnancy, I felt like, okay, like this is I'm still in this routine. I know sometimes people with diabetes, because you have to be so well managed and so tightly controlled during pregnancy, it's like after the baby's born you kind of let yourself relax a little bit, and there's no problem with that. It's like to each their own, like whatever is going to get you through this time, and we're all just doing our best. But for me, I knew that lactation was one of my goals, so making sure that I was making enough milk to breastfeed, and then also healing from the cesarean section was very important to me. So I said, you know what, the best thing I can do for myself is to really remain focused on making sure I'm doing what I need to do. And then also, now caring for an infant and growing into a toddler, and knowing that I need to do my best so that I have energy and that I feel well, and that we can go out to the park or to the library, to the music classes and the story time, and all these things about motherhood that I was so looking forward to. Giving myself that gift of optimal diabetes management is what helps me to get up out of bed each day and chase the kids around and the dog, and to also be a partner for my husband. We're parents together, but we also, there's a reason we're doing this, right? We fell in love, we have a great relationship, and I also want to be there for him, especially since I do this work as a doula, but in the season of motherhood it's harder to do the in-person stuff, which is really where you might make more money. And I'm that person, I'm like, none of us that are doing this are in it for the money, right? We're not doulas because we are anticipating these, big bank accounts. But what we do get in return from this work that we do is honestly, in my opinion, more valuable than money sometimes. It's these beautiful connections, and a remembering of, what we're here to do as women, especially. Like, I do feel like this almost like ancestral connection to this type of work. Especially to like my maternal grandmother. She was a homemaker and she had her children, and she just dedicated her life to being a mother and to bringing life into the world. And some people like want to go out and chase the career, but to me, like, I just think that her life was incredible in that way. And I want to connect with more people who are doing that type of work too, is like raising families and having babies and everything that comes with it. But for me, I'm like, I can't stop creating and doing and making spaces for people. Like, that's just part of me too. So it gets all blended together here. But I do feel very fortunate that that first pregnancy, although it was challenging, the birth ended up being a really uh, positive experience. I don't know if not the C-section exactly, but like everything that happened afterwards. And then it was funny, just kind of the learning curve of like what life can throw at you. My second pregnancy was a little bit easier on me. The birth was actually incredible. Like, I felt so powerful and so strong. But then postpartum and everything, he ended up in the NICU with low blood sugar, and it was just such a different experience. And I had assumed, like, having a vaginal birth, especially a VBAC, that I would get this it would feel so redemptive and like this big moment of celebration. And I almost couldn't even celebrate what I had just accomplished because here I was in this scenario in the NICU where I felt he was more fine than they felt. And again, having to figure out like, how do I advocate for this baby who I love so fiercely? And, all the while being like, I hope that they don't know that I'm a doula and all, because I know like sometimes in the hospital, it's like, uh-oh, mom in that corner over there, she's a
Mhm.
doula, watch over her. Like,
Yes.
I'm like a hospital doula though. Like it's for people with diabetes. Like we do don't we don't mind being in the hospital for birth. Like we know that this is a safe space for the most part for many of us. So
All right. So I want to go back to your first pregnancy. So you had HG. How was it managing HG with diabetes?
incredibly challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, can you talk about that song?
So, if anyone is familiar with diabetes, diabetic ketoacidosis is an emergency situation, and you don't always get that from having high blood sugar. It's also when you're not eating enough, and so you can get what's called like starvation ketones, and that can put you into this ketoacidosis state. And so, for me, that was my biggest fear, is because I had navigated life with gastroparesis for so many years. That had happened to me before outside of pregnancy, where I'd get into a cycle of vomiting. So cyclical vomiting would be happening. I wouldn't be having much to eat. So even though my blood sugars on paper looked really good, I would start to feel really unwell. It's almost like when people do the keto diet and they call it like keto flu. Well, with a person with diabetes, especially with someone with a history of cyclical vomiting, it was a nightmare. And really, like I felt like my mind, like it was just one of the biggest trials of my life, was because there was just this mental hurdle in addition to the physical hurdle. In addition to being a first-time mom and worrying like, is my baby getting what they need? And kind of just putting my trust into a higher power to say, like, I trust that this baby is being provided for as it needs to be. The scans are going well, everything looks good. I might look like, at the end of the Twilight where Kristen Stewart is like having the vampire baby and she's all like pale and like sickly. That was me the first time. I'm like, I see that picture and that is myself. Um, but it felt disappointing to again not be heard when I was expressing my concern about my well-being and how I really just wanted fluids. And one of the more disappointing parts of that was that I was actually referred to the perinatal mental health clinic that it's connected with my hospital. And I'm someone that is like I'm a huge mental health advocate. Like people need more support with all of that. So I said, I will go to that appointment. And when I went in, it was expressed to me that this was actually a program that was only medication based, so that they didn't have resources for you if you were not interested in medication. And I felt like the response from the particular MFM doctor that I was seeing at that time was that I was being non-compliant because I wouldn't enter a program that was putting me on a medication. And, it was really hard to speak up in that way of being like, listen, like, of course I'm crying to you. I throw up every day. I don't feel very good. I thought that this would be different. My diabetes is very well managed, but I don't feel well. And at every appointment with this particular woman, it was, mentions of stillbirth and not so great outcomes. And even one time after I had come back and said like, oh, I didn't choose to go through with the program because it's medication based and I'm just not interested in that for myself. I think it was said to me, well, if you are feeling this way now, like you're going to have a terrible postpartum. And basically she was telling me like, you're going to be a terrible mother. You're going to be so unhappy and so unwell. And um it just was really, really upsetting. And it reminded me of why people need doulas who work for them and not people that just work for the hospital or the system. Or, people need doulas because they can get to know you on a level like many clinical providers cannot. And they can be the ones to really to see you and to hear what you have to say. And um, it's funny. People always ask, so you're a doula. Did you have a doula? And I did not, and I really should have. I did find someone locally that does have type 1 diabetes that does this work, but it was a little too late that first time. And I just didn't want to have to explain diabetes to one other person, which is why I didn't choose to have one. But I know kind of in retrospect now that that probably would have been helpful during some of those scenarios, that even if that person didn't understand diabetes, they probably would have given me some advice on advocating for what I needed with hyperemesis. So
So, what are some of the stigmas or narratives that are painted around women with diabetes during pregnancy? Like, what were some of the things that you were hearing from, like, the nursing staff, the doctors, and even stuff that you heard when you probably went to the hospital in labor? Because sometimes it's kind of like, oh, hands off, like you have the cooties or something like that. So, what were some of the experiences that you experienced from that, but then also kind of linking it back to that stigma? And even some of the stuff that your clients now currently face, like what are some of the real life challenges that they are having also with being with different providers?
I think it's the fear mongering that we're used to outside of pregnancy. So like when you get diagnosed with diabetes and you're navigating your own care, like there's always complications being talked about. Like, you're gonna lose your foot, like you're gonna go blind, like you're gonna, your toes, like all these parts of you that are not gonna be well. And um many people with diabetes know what can happen to them. And telling them all the problems that they may or may not have is not going to be what supports them to better manage their blood sugars or seek out support with nutrition or exercise or whatever it might be, mental health. So I think just all of those kind of ideas of people explaining to you the fearful things that you're already worried about, right? Like I'm already worried about miscarriage. I'm already worried about complications for this growing baby, all the things that can go wrong as it develops, especially, that first trimester when everything's kind of forming, like how important it is to have tight blood sugar control and how just how stressful that can be, especially when your hormones are changing and it's something that you've never experienced before. So, like I had mentioned, I wear this technology that gives me many data points to look at and to make decisions based off of. And I am like, I am a do-it-yourselfer. Like my diabetes management, like my endocrinologist, oh, God love her because she is such a saint when it comes to being my doctor because she knows I'm like, I'm going to listen to your advice, but I might not follow it. Because I get better outcomes when I kind of just do diabetes my own way. And that's something I carried into my pregnancy. It's like, okay, I'm going to take their advice. I'm going to listen. I'm a doula. I love the evidence-based information. But sometimes we have to figure out our own way and hearing that, oh, like if you don't manage your blood sugars, your baby is going to be too big and then you won't be able to birth them vaginally, or you're going to need a C-section because of shoulder dystocia or whatever that might be, or your baby is going to have low blood sugar and they're going to end up in the NICU. And just these tropes that we expect in the diabetes space, just kind of being constantly thrown at me. But there are providers that I did find along the way who were supportive, who would look and see that, I had an excellent A1C despite being so sick. And even in my second pregnancy, I had better diabetes management than even in my first pregnancy. And my numbers were even below the level of what someone who has pre-diabetes would have. So I'm like, on paper, if you look, my A1C is about a 5.4 right now. Like that's lower than someone that would be diagnosed with pre-diabetes. Like, I mean, I think this baby's going to be just fine. So I think just kind of remembering that I was just doing my best and doing the right thing and not really trying to take all this info that they were throwing at me to heart. And again, that was more in my first pregnancy. I found a much more supportive provider, an OBGYN for my second that I adore. And the other people in her practice were also very supportive of me. And so I felt much more cared for the second time around.
That's good. It's so important to find providers that you mesh well with that actually listen to you, because you said that was one of the issues that you had with your first I guess it was the first obstetrician that you were dealing with, where you weren't listened to. So that's like number one, having someone that's actually going to listen to you, listen to all of your complaints, and then actually take it and try to figure out a care plan for you instead of just kind of shoving you off. And it's important because it makes you feel important because they're taking the time to do that. But it's so important, to find that provider that meshes well with you. And I tell all of my doula clients, if at any point you feel that the provider that you have is not listening to you, not making your concerns seem valid, then you definitely have to find another provider. So what was something that well, I don't want to say was something. So what was a reason why you didn't necessarily find another provider during that time?
I think just being so sick in the day to day and just being like, I'm just trying to get through this the best that I can. And I also have a deep mistrust for medical providers just based on all the things that I went through with diabetes. And, I had an A1C as high as 18 at one point, which is like,
Wow.
just, I mean, I tell my story, as I mentioned before we started recording. I'm like, you can ask me anything. I talk about pretty much everything that I've been through. I'm very transparent. I'm not that person that was diagnosed with diabetes and like, did okay and then had to do better for pregnancy. Like, I have pushed my body to the absolute limit of where it can go with not taking care of it, that I think it almost gives me a chance to like exhale and relax a little bit when it comes to all these other little things this far along. Because I've been in some bad places with diabetes, and as long as I'm not there, I know that
Right.
I'm doing okay. And I share that with honesty because I want people to know that, even if you're somebody who has had the diabetes diagnosis and you're struggling with, getting your A1C into a range that feels like you could even entertain the idea of pregnancy. It's like, I have been there. I understand. Um and as far as like trying to find like a different provider, I just felt like no matter who I found, I wasn't gonna like them. And I don't know, it's hard. I don't want to be that person that has this mistrust. Like, I really do, especially now that I'm a doula too. I want to develop these better relationships. But I think that's what makes me a good doula is like, I can put on this kind of neutral or even happy face, but meanwhile I'm taking in this information and I'm kind of reading the room in a way that maybe people who haven't had to advocate for themselves so strongly in medical spaces before, maybe they don't have that lived experience the same way that I do. And I bring into my work, this professional training, but also so many years of lived experience. Like, I was diagnosed at 15. I'm 35. I've got 20 years of diabetes under my belt. Like, I can't believe it. I didn't know I would ever get here. Like, I know life goes on, but it just feels like, wow, like it just, sometimes I can't believe that 20 years have gone by living with this. But pregnancy with diabetes will always be one of my greatest accomplishments because it's not easy. It's doable. And it's definitely worth it for sure.
Yes. So tell me a little bit of how you pair your work as like a nutrition coach for diabetes patients with your doula work. So how does that kind of coincide or work simultaneously together?
Sure. I see diabetes and reproductive care as lifelong companions. So my support really um, helps people to navigate that relationship like across all seasons of life. And um, I don't know, I just feel like there's so much that diabetes impacts. Like, it can impact our physical health, our mental health. It impacts all these systems within our body. As I mentioned, like, I've dealt with things with my eyes, with gut health and motility. I have neuropathy. But I think that, for me, it's just important to meet people where they are and to figure out what part of this do they need the most support with. And also, it's funny, and I say this during a lot of my consultations with potential clients. I'm like, just so you know, like, normally with doula work, we don't really share about ourselves. We don't
Right.
really share about our birth experiences or pregnancies unless we're asked. And there's, some discernment there. I said, but with this work that I do, because it's so unique, where I'm really supporting people, specifically those who are living with diabetes, part of the magic is sharing, right? And so, and not, not oversharing in that setting, but letting people know like this is what I've gone through, this is what I've done. And that's what people want out of these calls. And I always say to them, like, I'm a bad business person because what I'm going to tell you right now is that I don't think that you should hire me unless you can't find somebody that you feel as connected to in person. Like I love the virtual support that I'm able to provide. I wish that I could like snap my fingers and teleport to wherever these clients might be,
Yeah.
but right now, there's no technology that allows us to do such things. So until then, the best thing that I can do is be this person on Zoom or FaceTime or text and email or a phone call. If you find someone in person who you feel super connected to, that person may be a better choice for you. And I'm happy to support you in a different kind of way, whether it's just in a smaller capacity as a virtual doula, like it doesn't have to be the whole signature package, like I'm on call for your birth. But what ends up happening oftentimes is people are like, no, I want you because of the part of you that is so knowledgeable about life with diabetes. Like that's what makes this appealing to me. That's what I'm looking for. So I know that this is a service that is sought after by many people, and I have actually met some doulas who are doing birth work and doula work, who have type 1 diabetes like me, but they don't talk about it in their work. So they may be available, and even the woman locally that I know, she mentions it, but it's not like she's not posting about diabetes all the time. It's just kind of an added benefit when you get her. Like, she does have just such an incredible knowledge, and she's just a wonderful doula outside of all the diabetes stuff. But I really do feel like I'm stepping into a role that it feels just so right for me, based on all these other things that I've experienced, and the ways that I've tried to better inform myself really touches upon like that holistic care of diabetes health, and that trickles into preconception, pregnancy, and postpartum just so nicely.
Yes, I want you to talk a little bit about how diet plays a role in managing your diabetes, especially for women that are pregnant and postpartum, because sometimes you find that providers give you kind of a standard generic diet plan and they say, hey, here, follow this and you'll be fine and your glucose levels will be fine. And a lot of times women find that that isn't necessarily the diet for them. So what advice do you give to your clients or just for the women that are listening that are living with diabetes? What advice do you have for them with managing their glucose levels with diet?
I think remembering that we're all unique individuals and that the ways that my body responds to certain foods is not the same way that my peers experience their food, and their digestion, is a little bit faster than mine sometimes. So for me, like I always like to find the silver lining. So with the slower motility, the slower gastric emptying, I do have a little bit more time to figure out insulin dosing. Now, it doesn't always work out because sometimes my stomach is digesting more efficiently, less efficiently, like whatever it might be. So there is a little bit of variability there. But for something that I share for everybody, it's like making sure that you're dressing up your carbs. That's what we call it in the community. It's like you want to make sure that you're pairing the carbohydrates that you're eating with, healthy fats and protein and fiber, and just really trying to see how you can make the most out of the nutrition that you're taking in, but also leaving space for food joy. This wonderful woman, Mila Clark, she goes by the Hangry Woman. She's got this amazing app. I want to give it a shout out. It's called the Glucose Guide, and she does some health coaching on there. And she spoke at a conference that I was at back in May in New York City, all about food joy, and it's just this reminder like that, food should also be fun. And many of us are part of families where like food is a big focus, and it's the way we come together for celebration, or after a funeral, you're grieving and like, let's go have a little bit something to eat and make us all feel better. And just because you have diabetes or just because you're pregnant with diabetes doesn't mean that you can't experience the food joy that's available and just figuring out the way that it works for you. I love traveling to diabetes conferences. I've had the privilege of speaking at many and teaching yoga and usually if so we call them like your diabestie. So my diabestie, Kiana, she lives in New Jersey, and if we're at the same conference, we always try to get like a hotel together, or we'll like get an Airbnb like a few days before. And she's a perfect example of like when we're cooking together, the way Kiana puts food on her plate looks a lot differently than how I put food. Because I can eat jasmine rice where Kiana's like, I can't touch the stuff. Like I'm gonna go for the quinoa. And it's about knowing what works for you and not being afraid to speak up for what you need in whatever situation that you may be in, whether it's, you're going out to eat at a restaurant and trying to figure out, like, how do I order this so that my blood sugars are most supported? And, what order of foods, am I going to eat tonight to make sure that I'm getting what I need before I have that dessert? Or, maybe you want to, and this is obviously outside of maybe pregnancy, but like maybe I want to have a nice glass of wine or something like that that might have a different effect on my blood sugar. And just trying to educate yourself, but also remembering like, we eat every day, hopefully, for many of us like that are lucky enough to have an abundance of food, it's like there's going to be a chance to try again. And though,
Yeah.
the next day with diabetes feels daunting when you're like, this is every day for the rest of my life. If we flip that script a little bit and say, like, well, we have another day. Like today, maybe it wasn't so good. Tomorrow can be better. And let's take this information that we learned today. And this is where I kind of bring in the work that I've done studying meditation and spirituality and let's try not to judge ourselves. Like let's take the judgment out of this. Like there is no morality with diabetes. You're not a good diabetic or a bad diabetic. And I try to use the phrase living with diabetes because I never want someone to feel like this label on them. But um there is there's an opportunity for compassion here, for self-compassion. And then when you start to look at yourself as this person that is flawed and has challenges, and it actually allows a softening and this opportunity to kind of look at other people. And I feel like it's provided me with an opportunity to learn so much more empathy too. It's like, I'm going through, I'm just trying to eat dinner here. And I didn't know it was going to be like this whole math equation. Like I was
Right.
not a math girly growing up. Like I did not sign up for a disease that was like heavy on the math. Like that's why I'm a non-clinical practitioner at this point. Like, but with diabetes, it's like, well, we got to show up for ourselves and figure out what we need. And but also don't forget, like food can be fun and to kind of pick your battles here. It's like, all right, well, maybe I won't have that at breakfast time, but I know I'm going to take, that walk right before dinner. I'm going to take the dog out after work, and then
Right.
I'm going to enjoy some extra carbs at dinner time because I was able to move my body, and that's going to, increase insulin sensitivity. It's going to lower that insulin resistance because I got some movement in today. And maybe that's what allows me to have a better outcome with my blood sugars.
Good. I love everything that you're saying. I love how positive your outlook is for people living with diabetes and managing diabetes. Because a lot of times you hear people where it's kind of doom and gloom and everything like, woe is me. And so I love that outlook that you have and the outlook that you are able to, kind of push off on other women to help them because a lot of times they feel alone. And I think that is one of the things, that makes you such a unicorn because you've experienced, like you said, you've pushed the limits on, where your diabetes have been. And so it's nice to have someone like you to be able to relate to. And then you're so encouraging and so uplifting. And that's so much needed, especially for women who have any type of issues that are going on with them with their pregnancy. So we are getting close to the end of our conversation. I hate it though, but I just want you to just let the listeners know any lasting advice that you have for them. What are some advice that you have for women with diabetes? What things would you like for them to take away from what you've spoken about today? Or it doesn't have to be something you've already spoken about. If it's something new that you want to share.
Sure. Yeah, I think finding community is the biggest piece of this. And that's what I'll preach on any podcast or any opportunity that I get to speak, whether it's pregnancy and postpartum related or not, is find the people who understand you, who want to support you, and make sure that you have connections to these people in some way, whether it's in-person support or virtual support. Like there's a huge diabetes community online. Instagram's a great place. I know TikTok these days is full of people with I'm like, I'm on the precipice. I'm like, I'm feeling just a little too old for the TikTok stuff, but I know that people are there. And then, there's, like I mentioned, Mila Clark, the Hangry Woman. She's got an amazing blog with recipes, and she's got the app, the Glucose Guide app, which I think is a wonderful place for people to go. So as much as I would want to share more about the things that I offer, but like I'm sending you to Mila's app first. She's awesome. And just remembering that you're not alone. I think that that's, the biggest piece in this. And, you know, the isolation that we can feel after that diagnosis. And then especially like when you're moving through a pregnancy with diabetes, it's very easy to feel overwhelmed, especially when you're juggling all the other aspects of life, whether it's, taking care of your home or work or your relationships or whatever it might be. It's like we can't do it all, right? We can do the best we can each and every day, but we need to figure out what our priorities are in the moment and then just do our best. And again, opportunities for self-compassion, um, and just awareness about yourself and what you might need, and allowing yourself to be a little selfish. Like sometimes you have to put yourself first when it comes to your health, and there's no shame in that. And that's the example that I want to set for my children. Now being a mother, it's like, listen, like you got to take care of yourself. This is the vessel that allows you to experience all the things in life, whether it's good or bad or in between. It's like this is the meat suit that we got, and you got to take care of it because we only get one. So, but I do lead a peer support call every Wednesday evening on Zoom. We've been meeting for a little over 6 years now. I've been doing peer support for women with diabetes since I was 23, so many years now. And I just think it's great to be able to come together. And my call is very casual on Wednesday nights, and it's free. It's open to everyone. It's open to women with diabetes, but we also welcome those who are non-binary or gender non-conforming. So making sure we have a space. Just the guys, I can send you to another call. I got friends that lead a support group for men, but anyone else is welcome to come and share. And we call it the garden because there's a quote from Jack Cornfield, one of the spiritual teachers that I love. He says, tend to the part of the garden that you can touch, something like that. And we can't fix the whole world, right? But we can each tend to that part of the world or the part of our community that we can actually touch. And as long as we're all doing that, this world is going to be a better place. So let's focus on, the part of life or the people that we can actually have a relationship with. And so we come on the call and we share our rose and our thorn. So we share the
Oh,
good part of the week and the not so great part of the week, because there's a little bit of both. And so it's not that support group that's like, oh, diabetes stinks and I hate this, which you're allowed to feel that way. But it's like, okay, but is there anything good that happened this week? Like, did you get a really good cup of coffee from Dunkin' Donuts that you don't, usually that person doesn't make it that good and they made it so good and you were happy. Like, what is like the smallest thing that you can think of that was really nice? Did you see a beautiful, sunset, or did your toddler say something that made you laugh, or whatever it might be? Just the smallest of things can sometimes turn your attitude around. And as far as the work that I'm doing, I have ongoing one-on-one services available. I'm still navigating how the lactation education fits into all of it. But that training was amazing, and I'm loving being able to support more people in that way. But yeah, it's been I can't believe now I've got a baby who's a year old, and that's why I reached out to you, Candace, because you were putting it out there for people that might like to share their story. And I'm like, I think this second maternity leave of sorts needs to kind of like sort of come to an end a little bit. And I need to really start putting myself back out there in a bigger way, just so that the message can get out there. And then, I have a lot of free resources on my website. And again, the Wednesday night support call is a way to connect with me. Even if you might not be able to always afford the one-on-one services, it's still a way to keep in touch and to have a relationship with me. I wish I had more time to do calls like that, but two kids, it's a lot to even spend
I know. Yeah.
one
I
night on the computer. But um, yeah, I just find so much joy in being able to just be in relationship with anyone, whether they have diabetes or not. It's, because there are so many people out there that are living with other chronic illnesses that see themselves when we share about diabetes, or even if
right.
you don't have chronic illness, but you're dealing with other things like, um, we're all more similar than we realize sometimes. And I think that that's great to keep in mind.
Yes, it is. Do you have any social media that people can connect with you? Can you give the handles for those or a website, whatever you have?
So you can find me at thediabetesdoula.com. That's my website. And same as my doula Instagram is at the diabetes doula. And then I also have like my diabetes like blog. It used to be my blog back like 10 years ago when I had more of just a blog, and but it's just my name. So it's Sarah with an H, and then it's a double underscore and Petty, Petti. That's how
Okay.
you'll find me.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. I really enjoyed the conversation that we had today. And I also enjoyed all of the information that you gave out. I learned some things myself. So I appreciate you for wanting to share your story with me and my listeners. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of that. If today's episode spoke to you, take a moment to share it with another mama who may need it, or leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. This is Candace Jackson reminding you that your story and your voice matter more than you know. Until next time, be well, mama.